Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and I'm hoping that you are well. Thank you for joining today's session, and as we go through yet another webinar, and today we're going to be covering how to build shared understanding and managing budgets and also schedules as well. Before we start, we always start by checking where you're from. So feel free to post on the chat where you're joining from. I'm joining from Dubai. I'm originally from Kenya, but I'm based out of Dubai. It'll be good to know who the candidates today, where you're from. So feel free to post on the chat. Today's instructor, I think you've already seen her before. Her name is Susan. And she's going to take us through the session today. Feel free to interact, post on the chat if you have any questions. She'll be able to answer them as soon as she can. But we're going to cover several things, and we'll also have a chance for question and answers as well towards the end. Susan, if you're ready, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. This is an interesting one. I didn't realize where the backgrounds came from. Okay, I thought it was my background. All right. Okay. I see we're coming from different places. Please confirm that you can see my screen, that you can hear me, and you can see my slides. I have Mastering Project Success as our topic for today.
Yes, you can see the screen and can also hear you. And I see thumbs up as well.
Merci beaucoup. Okay, a lot of my Nigerian and Ugandan people from Kenya, from South Africa, Ghana, Canada, greetings to all of us. Something that I would like us to discuss today, because this is in preparation for the PMP. So even though we are going to be talking about things that are practical to our business use cases and to the ways that we work, we also want to remind ourselves of what is obtainable in the exam. Let's do a quick poll on the chat, please. If you are prepared to write your exam, what date do you have set up for your exam? And if you don't have your date set up already, when would you like to write your PMP exam? Let's do a little check here, just test the room and see who's ready for the exam and who is just testing the waters. Sorry, let me put up my silent there. No, I cannot speak French. Unpo just a little bit. All right. I love a lot of March, April. Some people are writing this month. That is great. That is great. Well done. Okay. Nelson has already spoken a little bit about me. You have already committed to writing the PMP, and you've already made a huge investment. For us to be talking about your exam dates, I want to assure you that the investment that you've made is a very good one, because this is still the world's leading project management certification. I have people asking me every other day, what project management certification should they take? And yes, there are a couple of specializations, but I would recommend, you can do specialized courses, but if you want to get certified, then you should do the PMP. So it is still your best investment. If this is your first major certification that you want to take, I would say that was a great decision. Well done. Okay, so the exam is going to be based on your three main areas, three main domains: people, process, and business environment. Oh, sorry. something changed there. The process is about 40 something and business environment is 8. I think that got changed in between and I forgot to update it. Okay, but there is a coming July, which does not apply to the majority of us because most of us have our exams scheduled for the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months. So this is what will apply to us. We still have about 42% people focus, about 48% about, let's do the math. I know the business environment is 8 and people and process share about the same. Okay. If you want to see more, I have a free webinar coming up on Friday that I'm answering questions, specific questions, but we'll answer questions today as much as possible. Okay, so our topic for today is building shared understanding. Okay. Sorry, I'm just checking messages to see if we're still aligned. Right. Building shared understanding. What do we understand by a shared understanding within the project context? Why is this something that is relevant to PMP? Why is it relevant to our project environment? As you can imagine, one of the major things that the project manager spends his or her time doing is communication. Is that right? Communication. And in fact, that is the question that if you saw in the example, the project manager spends 80% of their time doing what? The answer would be communicating. Okay? And so having miscommunication or a breakdown in communication would be then, one of the most misunderstandings within the project context. That we build shared understanding in our projects. Has anyone ever had an experience with their projects or their team where you're trying to get your team members to do something? You give them the assignment, you give them the task, you send them on their merry way, and when you come in to check what has been done, what they have done is completely far away from what you have asked them to do. I want to see some emojis if you've had a similar experience. Anyone had that experience? Anyone have that experience? Yeah. We would like to share, even if it's just one. Yeah. We would like to share one experience. Would someone like to unmute their mic? Because this is an interactive session. We're all project managers here. Anyone want to raise their hand? We can unmute you, and so you can contribute to the conversation. Going? Someone raising their hand and I don't see them. I'm checking. Nobody wants to contribute yet? Okay, there will be other opportunities to contribute. Okay. I had, in fact, I have one every day. I have a small team of 12 people, and I run a small consulting practice. And every day I'm training, every day I'm teaching, every day we're managing projects, and I'm realizing that until we have a shared understanding, we cannot move forward on our projects. We're just going to be frustrated. And so it is very important that we understand what it is that, we understand what it is that we are trying to achieve on the project. So one of the things that helps us to achieve a shared understanding is what, according to, I'm looking at the chat, according to the PM Box 7, the document that has So let's mention some of the documents, but I'm going to ask a particular question and then we'll have the answer. So what's the name of the document where the team has an aggregation of their expectations, the agreements of how they're going to engage with each other, the expectations of each member of the team. Thank you very much, Rosita. That's the right answer. The team charter. So this is one of the tools that we can use to help build shared understanding. But of course, there are several other tools that we have. We have a project charter. The project charter helps us to understand what are the responsibilities within this project, who is authorized to manage resources on this project. So we know who to hold accountable for things and we know who is responsible for some things, right? Okay, so we're still moving on. Now because we know some of there's sometimes misunderstanding in our projects. There's sometimes misunderstanding in our projects, and we want to know what is the root cause of such, misunderstanding. There's this PMP video that I watched, and they used the problem as someone failing their PMP exam. By God's grace, none of us are going to have that experience. But if someone were to fail their PMP exam, they could use an Ishikawa diagram, a root cause analysis technique like this to identify what were the causes, what were the things that resulted in us failing this exam. And typically, it is either of these categories. Is it the method? Is it the tools that we used or the machines? Is it the people? Is it man? So man or people? Is it the materials? Maybe we didn't study well enough. Was it our environment? Was it too cold or too hot? Was it how we were testing? So measurement. Did we, we're taking very easy practice exams. We weren't taking very difficult ones. Was it the method of learning? Was it, maybe the device or the computer that we were taking the exam on had some faults? So those are, some key areas that we could now say, okay, let's have the breakdown of where those problems could have come up from. Okay. Can we list a couple of other root cause analysis that we might find in the course of our exam? So root cause analysis techniques, please. Can we just put them in the chats? Thank you. So we've mentioned only one, the Ishikawa or fishbone diagram. What other root cause analysis techniques can we find? Problem tree, thank you very much. On the slide, I also have 5 whys is a technique. Thank you, Monday. Which other one? So it's not part of the basic, or it's not, maybe if you were reading the PM Box 7 cover to cover, you might not have covered, it's a large number of them. However, in the exam, you would likely see a question like this. It would say, which of these, so they would describe a problem. For example, we have this misunderstanding with our project, and we're trying to figure out what was the problem. Was it was it a missed, like we had a missed deadline? Was it because someone did not communicate properly? Was it because we were assuming something and meaning another thing? And so what was the root cause? How do we get, or they might not use the word root cause. How do we get to the bottom of this problem, right? And in your options, you would now say, which of these is not one of the ways that we could use, or which of these wouldn't we use to identify the cause of this problem? And so it's important for us to understand these different methods so that we can, identify them. Okay, so I've spoken about one of the techniques that we could use, and thank you everyone for contributing some more. I've spoken about what we could do when we have a breakdown in communication. But one thing we want to realize is that we must instead of just fighting over, oh, this problem, going back and forth, we want to identify that root cause. So after we've used the any of these techniques, 5 whys, Pareto principle, or Pareto charts, the Delphi technique, the cause and effect diagrams, the next thing that we would want to do is we would want to analyze the communication gap. So where is this problem from? In my team, I always say the burden of understanding lays on the head of the sender. The sender of the message is primarily responsible for ensuring that the receiver gets the message, receives it accurately. And so, yes, sometimes the receiver, there's a blocker on the receiver's end, or they were not able to decode it, or they were not able to understand it, even though, one person has sent it different ways. And then there are several receivers, and the receivers are understanding this message, but one receiver is having a problem. So you say, oh, maybe this person is having an issue with, decoding the message. All right. So another thing that could cause the communication gap could be noise. We want to be conscious of cultural differences. We want to be conscious of technical jargon. An example of technical jargon is where you, as a project manager in a software development project, you're having to work with senior management, finance, the senior developers, and each member or each team member is speaking their own professional jargon, technical jargon. So your software developers are talking about code, and some of it is flying over your head. Your maybe your product managers are talking about the user experience, and you are just you're trying to bridge the gap between the leadership, the user, and the staff, or the project team. And you realize that there's a lot of language barriers and communicate. Even though you're speaking the same language, whether it's French or English, you're speaking the same language, but there's technical differences. So those things could also cause communication gaps. So we want to be aware of that and patient with that. Of course, the leaders need to practice active listening. Project managers around the team, and it's not just the one person who has been assigned, oh, you are the project manager on this team, that the person has been authorized by the project charter, yes, but every member of your team has to demonstrate leadership qualities, right? They have to be able to, and active listening is one of those leadership qualities. Okay, we're still on the topic of shared understanding. And we want to ensure that when we are communicating with our team and trying to make sure that everyone is on the same page, sometimes it is not democratic. Maybe you are in a project that does not allow for the democratic structure of decision making, but everybody must be on the same page they must align that this is where we are going. So we all know what the project goal is. We all know what the vision is, all the things that we are trying to achieve, right? And so even when you have stakeholders that are not invested in your project goals, I'm going to take that bit again. So yes, there are some projects where we want to, or we can afford to have a consensus, or we can afford to have everybody, let's hear everybody out. Oh, beautiful, we can hear everybody out. Now, those projects where, you know, the project manager is a servant leader and it is democratic, agile projects, that's all well and good. We have some maybe government projects or infrastructure projects. Projects, can we give examples of projects where the democratic democratic rule and democratic governance is not going to work here? We have very strict policies that we must abide by, and either you align with us or you get out. So there are some where you have to have autocratic decision taking. But even in those type of projects, we want to ensure that everyone understands what we are trying to achieve. Okay. One of the things that we need to do when we are reaching consensus, or when we are aligning and making sure that we have that shared understanding, is we want to understand our stakeholders. So yes, we will draw up our stakeholder register. We might have identified a couple of people on that stakeholder register. We also need to analyze the stakeholder register. We need to analyze who are those people who have high influence and high interest on the project. There are some persons who they have negative biases towards our projects, and they have the power to disrupt that project. Those kind of people, we want to not just keep informed, but we want to engage them and get their buy-in. What are some of the ways that we can get buy-in in this kind of environment? Well, we want to do simple consensus building techniques like FIST to 5, multi-criteria decision analysis, nominal group technique, and we're trying to achieve a win-win. So, you know, in conflict management or in negotiation, if we come to a consensus, it is regarded as a win-win. But now I was talking about situations where we have buy-in, or rather we need to get buy-in from people who we already know have negative bias towards this project. Have we had any such experience before? Have we ever felt like we were being targeted by someone on the team that they've not outwardly said it, but we can tell that, you know, they are not with us? Have we figured out, have we found out something like that? Have we discovered something like that with our team? Yeah, Zubairo. Sorry if I murdered your name. Yes, they don't believe in the project, but they are needed due to their expertise. So you might see a kind of you know, the apathy towards the project, and it really brings down the whole vibe of the project. Honestly, it's not very pleasant to deal with. So how do we deal with this kind of people? Because remember, we're still on the topic of building shared understanding, and this is something that we have to do across all levels of our stakeholders. So we have already mentioned some of the things that we would document, where we can find the vision, right? We've mentioned project charter, we've mentioned team charter. Here we also have scope statements. These are things that we can use as the source of truth so that we don't have disputes, so we can document the vision. Then we have progressive elaboration, because what we have agreed upon at the initial part of the project, as the project is progressing, we would realize that there are some change or adjustments that need to be made. This should also be documented. This should also be documented. Now, As a project manager, there are some things within your project that you do not necessarily agree on. And I have a very simple example. Again, we're now we're in between agile and predictive type of projects. Regardless of the environment of the project, when you have project team members who are working on a particular assignment and you want them to do, you want them to work on, you want them to do the work in a certain way. Maybe you want them to use a particular tool. Maybe you want them to show a dashboard on Excel, and this particular person is used to Google Sheets, or you want them to use Google Sheets and they're used to Excel. The information that they're going to be sharing is not going to be different. You just have a preference for the tool, right? That's the example. But do we want to be dogmatic and say you must use this particular tool? Let's remember that when project team members are able to suggest and suggest their ideas, and because they're the ones implementing the work, they're the ones doing the project work, when they get our buy-in on the ways of working, or some of the things that they were not clearly spelled out, like those modalities were not clearly spelled out, those things were left to our discretion, and now it has come to the discretion. We want to lead by example by saying, okay, this wasn't my preference, but you're the one delivering the work. Let's, use that. I want to support them fully. Okay. So, in your stakeholder management, you want to continually understand where your stakeholders lie in support. Someone that was supporting you in the previous meeting, all of a sudden we are doing project updates and you are noticing the body language has changed. You are noticing, they are not speaking up as they were speaking up before. Call them out, right? If there's an objection that they are willing to voice, then you are more likely to get a resolution than an objection that is just in their mind and they've not told anybody. You're just noticing it from the sidelines. So it's easier to if you're able to call out those areas of misalignment, you're able to now say, oh, this is not what we meant, this is what we're trying to achieve, right? And then when it is maybe it's not the stakeholders in this case are not superior to you. Maybe you've given assignments or you've broken down the work into certain work packages, and you want to make sure that the team really understands you. It will be good for you to do some back briefing, get your people to explain in their own terms how they would go about the work. All right. We're done with the first. We're going to do 3 different topics today: building shared understanding, managing budgets, and optimizing schedules. I have a little question for us today. I have a couple of questions, but the first question is on the board. Let me put it. Please read and let's get a response. I want to see the responses in the chat, please. They're going to give us 1 minute to put our responses in the chat. We're not just saying B because other people are saying B. Or maybe this is a very easy one. Okay, we have a couple more questions to go today. But do we have any questions? And we don't have to wait. So we have a segment at the end of the session for questions surrounding the PMP, but we don't have to wait until that time to ask our questions. We can ask the questions in the chat right away, because this is like the entire webinar is to prepare us for the PMP. So by all means, ask your questions. We'll address it as soon as possible. All right. Okay, thank you very much. The next part of our webinar, we're going to be talking about managing our budgets. What is a budget? What would you say is a budget? Who remembers? After this part of the lesson, of course, you can imagine the kind of questions that are going to come out of it. It's not going to be as easy as this first one, but let's look at it. Excuse me. Planned expenditure for the project. Thank you, Duncan. All right. We have several resources that the project has to manage, and you as the project manager, you are responsible for ensuring that we get the resources that we need to execute this project, right? And so we create a budget for our project. Let's an estimate. I like that, Godson. It's very simple, short and simple. And I'm sure that we've all, walked through certain estimation techniques or certain different types of estimation. And we understand, these different types. But this is just like high-level reminders for us so that we can begin to discuss some of them. But please, in the chat, can we just drop in some of the other estimation methods that are not listed here? So what are some of those estimation methods? Because we're preparing for our exam. So if you see them in the list, which ones would we have? Parametric, I like that. 3 points. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about some of the most common ones that we would see in the exam, and also we would, get a chance to use on a day-to-day basis on our projects. The first one there, Pert is good, Rosita. The first one there is bottom-up estimating. And basically, this is us aggregating the cost of the individual work packages. So we already have our WBS, we have our, scope broken down into work packages. And now these work packages, we've assigned resources to them on our schedule. And we can now aggregate the cost of that. And we now have our total project cost. So we're building it from the bottom to the top, and we have our total project cost. Now, on top of the total project cost, there is something that we add to get our cost baseline. So the aggregate of these work packages is not our cost baseline, it's the total cost. But there's something we add to the total cost that gives us our cost baseline. Does anyone remember what that is? Does anybody? Cost baseline minus dash gives us our cost aggregate. So the total cost aggregate of the work packages in that project schedule is, the budget. Contingency reserve. Thank you so much. Do we remember the difference between contingency reserve and management reserve? So all contingencies or all reserves, whether they're management reserves or contingency reserves, make up our total budget. All right. And we know that the contingency reserve is what is inclusive of all those reserves that the project manager has made allowance for. They've made accommodation for. So let's say we have a project timeline or project schedule of 100 days. And because the project manager knows this project team, because the project manager has dealt with these vendors in the past before, they can estimate, we may have a delay of 3 to 5 days here if things don't go too well. On this other part of the project, we may have a delay of 2 days. By the time they aggregate all of the risks, they've identified the different risks and have been able to set up contingencies for them. They can now have an additional, let's say, 15 days to 100-day project timeline. So that is a contingency reserve. That's a reserve that the project manager adds to the baseline. So that would be now the schedule baseline. If it was the budget, if we have, let's say, $100,000 for this project, and we're having an additional $20,000, this will be added to our cost baseline. So that contingency reserve will be added to our cost baseline. But the management reserve is not added to the cost baseline. Management reserve is what the organization or the project governance would keep aside for unknown unknowns. We have a court case. That's not something that is within the project manager's scope. We have a natural disaster. We have something that has not been accounted for in our risk management assessment. So would work with those management reserves to resolve such issues. Now we know we also mentioned they both use history from projects you could find in public databases, and you can use that to predict the cost for your current projects. Now, what are the things that the project manager has to anticipate as part of their risk management? Because remember, we've spoken about, we gave an example of the schedule, and we said, oh, they could have markets fluctuations. So they know the vendors, or they know what to expect from the particular team. So there are some things that the project manager or some experts within your project team might have already foreseen that these things that could account for extra cost or extra time. It's kind of impossible to talk about allowances or reserves and only talk about the cost implications, because on the project we have scope implications, we have cost implications, we would also have timeline implications. So usually when we have things like scope creep, where maybe this project you're managing for an external client, and now the client is trying to make some changes that are not in your project charter, they are not in your business case, they are not in your WBS. We did not authorize those changes. So because the signed and authorized WBS would now act as your scope baseline, because that's what is authorized as your scope for this project. But that is within a predictive context. In an agile context, we know that the scope is not fixed. Rather, what is fixed is what? Let me check if we're still following. What is fixed in an agile project? Fixed in a predictive project. Budget is fixed. Thank you, Duncan. Budget is fixed. What else can be fixed? What else is fixed in an agile project? Time. Thank you very much. Because we could say, you know, we only have 6 months to complete this, and we have maybe 150 items on our backlog. We have, you know, a budget of 1 million. Is out, we're done, regardless of how long it took. When the time is out, when the 6 months is done, we launch, you know, regardless of how many things are left on the project backlog. All right, we're still together. Thank you very much for your cooperation. So some of the other things that we could account for in our budget planning, we want to look at the cash flow of the organization. We know sometimes that projects are coming in, or the money is coming, money for the project is coming in certain tranches. So we would have to arrange for the resources to adjust to the way that money is coming in. Maybe it's on a monthly cadence, maybe it is on a weekly cadence, maybe we can only request for this money once in 6 months, and so we need to plan our budget around those funding limits. When we have procurements to do, things that have us, you know, having to purchase things, we wouldn't just rely on historical data and say, okay, yes, we were able to get these items for this amount last time, we would get them for this amount this next time. We have to account for market fluctuation as well. Okay. Now, I can imagine that some of us here are in the governance teams of our organizations. And what do you do when someone was supposed to spend, you know, a certain amount, and they are getting to midway of the project and the money is almost out? Because I don't want to say we have already gone beyond the budget, because you should have foreseen a little bit